All of our routes are complete. It's time to start making the to-do routes private and only letting users manage the to-dos they've created. Now, in order to get started, we're going to need to make a change to the to-do model. Currently, we store the text, the completed value, and the completed at timestamp. What we're going to also need to store is the ID of the user who created the to-do. This is going to let us make sure the user does indeed have access to manage this data. Now, to get started down below, after the completed at options object, we're going to make a brand new one called _creator. Now, you could call this property anything you want. I'm using the underscore to let the person who's using the model know it is an object ID, and creator seems like a good name because it stores the ID of the user who created it. Next up, we can go ahead and specify a few quick options. We are going to require this, so I will set required equal to true. You're no longer going to be able to make a to-do unless you have an ID, which means you're logged in. The other option we're going to specify is the type. Now, in this case, the type is going to be an object ID. In order to set a type equal to an object ID, we're going to go into Mongoose. We're going to access schema, which we've used inside of the user's file. Then we're going to go ahead and access the types object, and on there is a type object uppercase I, lowercase d. This is what we need to set our type to in order to set up the creator property. From here, we can now save the to-do model file and head into our test seed data. Inside of here, we currently have two to-dos. These are the seed to-dos we add to the database. They're available in our test cases. The problem is they're not associated with the user. What we're going to do is set creator for both. For the first to-do, I'm going to set _creator equal to the object ID of the first user, which we have access to via user1id. User1id. Perfect. And we're going to do the exact same thing for the second to-do item. Down at the very bottom below completed at, I'm going to add _creator. And for this one, we'll set the ID equal to user2id. Now, when we run the test suite, we'll be able to access the user's to-dos because we've associated each to-do with a real user. Now, the first route that you are going to convert is the post to-dos route. This is the route that creates new to-dos. Currently, when we make our to-do, we set the text equal to the body text. We also need to set the creator property right here. Now, in order to make this route private, as we know, we have to add the Authenticate middleware. And with this in place, we now have access to the user and the token that was used. All of that is configured over inside of the Authenticate middleware right here. That means inside of our post to-dos route, we can now set the creator property when we make our new to-do. Right here, I'm going to set _creator equal to the request user property, and then we're going to go ahead and grab the ID. This is the ID of the user. And there we go. Our post to-dos route has been successfully updated. Honestly, not too bad. Now, before we go any further, we're also going to tweak the get to-dos route. Then we can go ahead and verify that all of this works as expected. For get to-dos, we're going to also add that Authenticate middleware. This is going to require that an XAuth token is used when you're fetching to-dos. And instead of fetching all to-dos, we're simply going to fetch to-dos. We're going to provide a query, and we're going to look for to-dos where the _creator property equals the ID of the user that is currently authenticated. Request.user_ID. Now we're only going to be returning to-dos that the user who's logged in actually created, which means that if user 1 adds some to-dos, user 2 is not going to be able to view them when they try to fetch all of the to-dos. It's no longer all the to-dos listed in the database. It's now all the to-dos for the currently logged in user. I'm going to go ahead and save server.js, and we can start up our project over in the terminal. I'm going to use node mon to start up the file in the server directory called server.js. Once our server is up on port 3000, we can go ahead and move into Postman, fire off both of these requests, and see exactly what happens. First up, I am going to wipe the data in RoboMongo. Since we've added some new properties, I can simply drop the to-do app database. Then over inside of Postman, we can get started by signing up a user. Right here, I'm going to go ahead and sign up a new user using my default body data. This is going to give us an XAuth token, and that token is going to be used to make the two requests. Right here, I'm going to grab the XAuth token value, making sure to copy the entire thing. I'm going to copy it to the clipboard, and we'll get started by creating a new to-do using post/to-dos. Inside of the headers for the call, we are going to need to add a new one, the XAuth header, x-auth. Then we'll paste the XAuth token in as the value. Next up, we can go ahead and send this request off. When we do, what do we get? We get a 200 back, meaning that everything went as expected. And down below, we have our to-do. We have our text property. We have our creator ID. We have the underscore ID property, completed at and completed. This is fantastic. Now, when we make a to-do, the XAuth token is used to fetch the user, and the user's ID is stored right here. If I were to go ahead and wipe the XAuth token value and try to create another to-do, we're going to get a 401 unauthorized. Now, the next thing we need to test out is that when we fetch to-dos, we only get the to-dos back for the user we created. To do this, I'm going to sign up a second user. I'm going to use post users. I'm going to create andrew2@example.com, send that off, and I'm going to copy this XAuth header inside of my clipboard. Make sure to grab the entire thing from the beginning to the very end. Sometimes it goes off the screen. Sometimes it wraps to a second line. Now that I have the XAuth token value, we can make a new to-do using post/to-dos. I'm going to go ahead and set the XAuth header equal to this value. We're going to send it off, and we get our to-do back. Now when we call get to-dos with the XAuth header value, we should only see one to-do coming back, even though there's two in the database, because the second to-do, the one we won't see, was created by a different user. Right here, we'll set XAuth equal to the token for the second user. We're going to send off the request, and what do we get back? We get back just one to-do item. If we open up RoboMongo though, and we refresh to see the database we dropped, we will be able to see that there are indeed two documents inside of the to-dos collection. Right here we have the two, but we're only able to see one because we've made it private. Now, since we've made these routes private, our test cases are going to fail. If we head into the terminal and try to run the test suite using npm test, we're going to see that we get a lot of 401 unauthorized because the test cases, they're not specifying an XAuth header. So when we try to fire off the requests to create to-dos and fetch to-dos, you can see right here, we expect 200s, but we get 401s back. In order to fix this, all we have to do is make some small tweaks to the contents of our server test file. Up at the very top, our first two describe blocks are for the two routes we just changed. Here we have our test cases for post to-dos, and down below we have our test cases for get to-dos. We're going to go ahead and update these to use the proper authentication mechanisms. First up, the very first test, it should create a new to-do. Here, we need to specify an XAuth token value using the set method. We're going to set x-auth equal to the value we have over in the seat data. We're going to go into the users array. We're going to grab the first user. Then we're going to go into the tokens array, grab the very first token, and access that token property. With the token in place, this test case is now going to pass. All of the assertions we make below are not going to be affected by this change. We'll still expect the body to have a text property equal to the text we set. And when we find that to-do inside of the database, we're going to expect that the text also equals the text we set. Nothing needs to change here. The next test case is going to be pretty similar. It should not create to-do with invalid body data. We're going to need to set the XAuth header value. I'm going to go ahead and copy the line up above by adding it to the clipboard and pasting it down below, just below our call to post. Now we're passing along a valid XAuth token. We're going to go ahead and try to make the request to create an invalid to-do. And at the very end, we expect that the total number of documents in the to-dos collection should be 2, and that is still valid. Regardless of who created it, we have 2 seed to-dos in the database. Now the next test is going to be a little different. This is our test for getting all the to-dos, the get/to-dos route. We're still going to set up the XAuth header, but we are going to need to make some changes to our expectation down below. Currently, we expect that we're going to get 2 to-dos back, but we know that's no longer the case. Now that to-dos are associated with users, we're going to get just 1 to-do back. We have 1 to-do where the creator property is set to the ID for the first user. That means over inside of server.test.js, we're going to change this 2 to a 1, which is the correct number of to-dos that should get returned. Now that we have our test cases updated for the routes we made private, we can go ahead and rerun everything in the test suite. Now it's fine if some of our other tests fail because of these changes. As long as the 3 tests we just tweaked pass, we are good to go. And right up top, you can see just that happens. Both of our post to-dos tests are passing, and our get to-dos case is indeed correct. And that's fantastic. We've now converted a few of our to-do routes. In the next video, we're going to convert the final ones, wrapping up the process of associating users with to-dos. Let's take just a quick moment to summarize how we did this. The first thing we needed to do was update the to-do model. If a to-do is going to be associated with a user, we need a way to set up that association, and that happens right here. On the to-do, we store the ID of the user. Later on, we can go ahead and verify that a user created the to-do just by checking this property. Now, once we created this property, we also went ahead and added authentication to both of these routes. This means that we'll have access to the user and the token right inside of the request callback. And we can do stuff like this, where we set the creator property equal to the ID of the logged in user, or something like this, where we fetch all the to-dos, but we only return the ones where the creator property equals the ID of the currently logged in user. By adding authentication using the middleware and by using the ID inside of our queries, we're going to be able to make the to-dos private. Now that we have this in place, we are halfway done. We're not going to commit just yet. We'll wait until we have all the conversion done. In the next video, we're going to finish converting all the other routes. Stay tuned. I will see you then.